Hi everyone, my name is Rick Graham and I'm the creator of Revelations Battlefield, which we're getting ready to get into and do a kind of a how to play kind of video. Revelations Battlefield is currently on Kickstarter. So I know that with this video, as we move forward, I'm going to end up re-recording it. But it was important for me, I think, to be able to make a video, to be able to show you, how to play, how to get at least the gist of things. Now, I don't have anybody else with me today to be able to play a game against. So instead, I'm going to try to do this one in a little bit more of a impromptu kind of style where, it's kind of like you and I are here in my office and you're learning how to play. So some of the stuff might be a little less polished than maybe you're used to in some of your how to play videos. But like I said, during the campaign, I thought it would be more helpful to have something to be able to show you. So right now, our rules are in beta. They are available for free. Link will be in the description so you can go download those, as is all the stats for the game. We're going to continue to keep releasing more and more stats. Our primary game, or first game that we had created, was Revelation Skirmish, and we're using all the same models from Skirmish for Battlefield. Now you might be wondering, well, Rick, why would you do that if you already have another game? Skirmish was designed to basically take the Revelations lore, the combat, the action that you read in the novels, and be able to translate that to the tabletop. So it was intended to be much more of a simulation of sorts of, simulating what combat is like in Revelations. And that is much more of a tactical kind of, it's a very destructive and reactive kind of tabletop game, but it's not for everybody, and I get that, and that's totally fine. And what I wanted to do was to create a kind of sister game to that was focused on being simpler, less rules, and more focused on faster gameplay, because not everyone has 2 or 3 hours to be able to play a game of Revelation Skirmish, but they might be able to have 45 minutes to an hour to be able to play Battlefield. And because we're using the exact same models, you as the player can decide which game you want to play when, as you're moving forward with everything, and be able to jump back and forth between different engines or different campaigns and get more value out of each model that you purchase. All of our models, if you're new to our community, all of our models you can either purchase as physical versions from our shop, link will be also in the description, but also you can 3D print them yourselves for personal use. We've included pre-supported files that we continue to update and upgrade and release as things move forward and we tweak things, but we make those available so that you can 3D print them for yourself. We believe that 3D printing is a very big opportunity moving forward, especially for a lot of us as gamers. We're very budget aware, especially right now with the way things are. And 3D printing is a great way for you to be able to get a lot of bang for your buck. So we make sure that our STLs are available for you guys to be able to print. So with the Kickstarter campaign, our primary objective is, one, to help us get funding for more models. We're taking the majority of our models with the stretch goals and applying battle damage to them. So you'll have multiple versions available for each unit, or not the infantry, but everything else. And the other bonus of doing the Kickstarter campaign is that we're looking to get funding to upgrade our website, which we have a list builder for Revelation Skirmish. It's revelationswar.com. And we'd always intended for that to be a hub site that would be for all of the Revelations themed games, because we would love to do a space combat game, a larger scale battalion sort of combat game, and more. So we're using Revelations War with Revelation Skirmish to be our first game on the platform. With Skirmish, you're able to go there, print your list, build your list also as well, and print your stats. And we want to be able to upgrade that site to also include Battlefield. So currently, if you're looking to print the stats, which link will also be in the description, we have a PDF that has 3 of the units on each page, and you would just cut those out, and then you could either put them into a penny sleeve or however you want to do that moving forward. And then that way they're also dry erasable, or you could just use a pencil or pen or something else to help track your damage as you're moving forward. We'll get into the stats in a moment, but I'm just trying to cover the gist of things just so that you kind of know where to find things. The rules are also on our website. Right now they're in beta. We're hoping to have the full version released very soon. That's also kind of dependent on how the Kickstarter goes, and then getting everything finalized and be able to say, okay, we finally have the the 1.0 version. But we're continuing to update this. As I record this, we're on version 0.6. And we're only making small tweaks for the most part, but it's still important to be able to make those tweaks and then because of the way that we have them set up through our shop, whenever we make an update, you receive an email, hey, there's a new version of one of the files you own, or there's a new version of the rule book. And then that way you can have the most up-to-date things and everything going forward. So as I said, this video is going to be very kind of impromptu and more personable, because this is if you were here with me right now. So to play Revelations Battlefield, obviously you're going to need units to be able to play, right? But for the sake of, let's say you're going to proxy things or something because you maybe want to test out the game before you back anything on Kickstarter. We play on a 3x3 space, which is the same as with Skirmish in most of the settings. The objective for the game, for Battlefield, is for you to score victory points, primarily, off of being within range of the various objective tokens. So, for example, we have one on my side, one in the middle, and then one on the opponent's side. The relevancy of that is that when it is the scoring phase, which is starts at turn 2 and then onwards until someone hits 10 points and that ends the game, you get 1 victory point for the token that's nearest you, 2 for the one in the center, 3 if you control the one on your opponent's side, and you can also get a victory point if you have any of your units, but only up to 1 gives you the victory point, within the deployment zone of your opponent's side, which is a 4-inch deployment that goes across the entire side of the table. We have a kind of a convenience measurement tool that also is included within our terrain templates, which I'll get into in a moment. It has a 1, 2, 3, and 4-inch measurement size for just for you to be able to have a quick way to be able to measure short distances. But you can use the 4-inch and be able to set it down, and you know, oh, okay, this is my deployment zone, that's yours, and so on. To score from the objectives, you have to be within 2 inches of one of the objective tokens. When it does come to scoring, whoever has the most number of units here, which each model is considered to be a unit. So like, for example, if I was using the Faust Union Forces, I have 2 units within 2 inches of my objective. So on my turn, I would get 1 point. Now, if you were to, let's say the dice are just absolutely against you in that game and they're just failing all over, it is still possible for you to win even though you weren't the first player to hit 10 victory points. So we built in a couple of things to help, as I said, to give you a kind of a end game bonus to then decide who's actually the actual winner of that game. The first is if you take a faction pure list. So unlike in Revelation Skirmish, you are allowed to mix any unit from any faction into your list. Right now, the standard point total is 200 points. So as long as you can fit any of those units within the 200 points, you're allowed to take it. And the other difference between Skirmish and Battlefield is that in Battlefield, you can take as many units as you want. There is no unit cap. The benefit here, in order to kind of help protect, because we're always trying to be mindful of breaking the game. And we're also trying to be mindful that, we're a very small studio. Revelation Skirmish has been on the market for just now coming up to 4 years. But we have, while we're still small, we're still trying to be mindful of what happens if this game does take off and it becomes competitive. We feel that if we put competitive mindset into the game, then that way we can take it from competitive and bring it back down to casual. Because I've played other games. I've been a war gamer for over 20 years now. And I've seen other games that began as casual and then everyone started getting really serious about it. But then it's difficult to take it up to competitive level because they may not have rules or safeguards to protect balance of the game already built in. So we're trying to be mindful of that now. So the reason that you're allowed to take as many units as you want in Battlefield is that on your turn, when you're playing the standard game mode, you are only able to activate 3 units or battle groups, which we'll get into later. But I'll activate 3, you would activate 3, and then it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until one of us gets to that 10 victory point goal and the game immediately ends. So, as I was saying, we got the 3 different objective tokens. We have in the rulebook, there is an example of how it's laid out. But basically what you're looking for is 18 inches in from one side. It'll be 7 inches up is the one that's nearest you. 18 inches right dead center of the mat is the one that's in the middle, and then it'll be 7 inches from the edge of your opponent's mat. All right. The other bonus that you can get, I was getting into the Faction Pure bonus. For the Faction Pure bonus, you get at the very end of the game 3 extra victory points. Those do not count to the 10, they count after the game is over. The other bonus point that you can get is for every 50 points that you have destroyed of your opponent's forces, you get an extra victory point. So if you're someone who's I'm just going to rush in, score a bunch of points as quick as possible, and I don't even care what dies on my side, as long as I get to that 10 first. But if your opponent was careful and got up to 7 or 8 victory points, even though they're not going to make it to the 10, they might have wiped out 150 of your points, and now they've got extra 3. And then they could end up pulling ahead because you were just so, you just bull rushed in there and got destroyed. So we wanted to kind of put that in there so it would kind of reward players for being cautious, but you have to take risk in order to be able to push forward to be able to get the victory points in order to be able to win the game. I covered you can mix any of the factions. You are allowed to take mercenary units. You're allowed to take 2 mercenary units, and your list is still considered to be faction pure. We may end up adjusting that slightly as things move forward, but there is also a mercenaries faction, or there will be when we add it into Battlefield. Currently, we only have the Core Republic, you can't really see, there's the Core Republic forces and the Faust Union forces available with stats. We're continuing to add more stats to the PDF, so that way you guys can see more and more of the stuff. But if you'd like, you can go to our shop, or you can go to revelationswar.com, and you'll be able to see all the different units that are available for the different factions for skirmish. We're going to be migrating all of that over. It'll take a couple of months because there's a lot. We have a very large catalog despite how small of a studio that we are. And we're continuing, we have more units that are on the way. And as we're moving forward, we are also going to continue to support skirmish while supporting Battlefield, which also helps because the same model gets used for both games. So now all we have to do is create stats for both. And that's not going to end up negatively impacting us in any way. And it provides 2 fully supported miniature games from our studio. So yeah, you can mix in mercenaries if you'd like. For this demonstration, as we're playing, we'll just assume the Faust Union is one side, the Core Republic is the other. When you sit down to play, you know what? We should probably get into the terrain templates. So there are 3 different types of terrain currently in Battlefield, and we're going to be adding like water and some other things down the road. But right now we have rugged, we have woods, and then we have blocking. We have made available in the printable assets product, which is free, we've made all 3 different types of templates. These are all FDM printed and then I painted them, but we've also included black and white and colored versions that you can just print off of your regular paper printer, and that way you can just cut those out maybe on some cardstock or something, and then you'll be able to have all the templates. One of the big things that we wanted to accomplish with Battlefield was being mindful of affordability. So a lot of the stuff that our stats are going to be for free, the rules are free, the templates are free, the tokens that you want, that you need to use, you can 3D print those yourself. So we've tried to be very price conscious to help out gamers because, it's financially difficult right now for a lot of us. But with these templates, there are 8 different sizes. Each terrain type has the exact same, you've got these, I believe these are 2x5. So everyone has the exact same set of templates. They're just the different types. Each of them also clearly says what terrain type it is, as well as the height of it. So down the road, we're going to be able to release different types of blocking that are level 2s, level 5s, level whatever we need to. And the same with woods. And then as we release other terrain types. And the benefit there is with the templates, it's very clear of how tall it is because it tells you. The units all on their stat profile or on their stat card says also how tall they are in kind of generality. So like the Anya and the Sierra as war mechs are level 2s. There's level 3 war mechs also. All vehicles and infantry and drones are level 1s. So that way, if you match the height of the terrain, you are considered to be blocked by it or hidden behind it. But with like the case of the woods, that'll just give you cover. With rugged, it's low terrain, so that does not block infantry or vehicles from being seen, but it does give them the bonus of terrain cover. 3 different types. Yeah, so these are available. You are allowed to use terrain, 3D terrain if you would like. We're eventually going to, God willing, we're going to be releasing 3D terrain that's official. but we wanted to include the templates first because you're able to take all 3 types of terrain and put them in a shoebox. And now you have multiple tables worth of terrain, and then as much as you print as well. When you're playing, you're only going to be choosing 3 pieces of terrain each. You can pick any type of terrain that you'd like, and you could pick the same type of terrain if you'd want. I like having the variation of the 3 with only 1 of each size. So then that way, no one's going to be taking, let's say, like the L shape for the blocking and just take 3 of those, and then I'm going to take 3 of those, and then it's all the same shapes on the table. When you are using your own 3D terrain, it is strongly suggested and recommended that you make it very clear with your opponent before the game starts, okay, what level is this going to be treated at? What type of terrain, if it's not super clear, like if it's not trees or a building, you might want to be very clear of like, okay, this will be considered blocking for this game, and it's a level 3, right? So that way it's very clear before the game begins, because I have played some miniature games before where I thought my opponent and I were clear because we played at the same game store, but no, we weren't. And then we're in the middle of a game, and I had already made decisions on where I was moving based off of the terrain, and then realizing, oh, that terrain's not really treated as cover for my infantry now, and that's a problem. So it's better to just be clear prior to getting into that kind of a situation. So we'll move this aside. All these templates, as I said, are available for free on our shop. We included, like I said, the FDM version, which I really don't think you'd want to print those in resin, but you could, which also includes the measurement tool that is in the files as well for that, as well as the tokens. The tokens in Battlefield are pretty straightforward. We've used the same ones that we use in Skirmish, we just use less of them. So you have... might be a little difficult to see here with the way that the camera is, but we'll do our best we can. You'll have target lock, which is you would put the small one on your unit that is declaring the target lock, and then you'd put the big one on the target. That helps you to be able to re-roll when you're playing. There is a bonus token, which it's a little triangle. There'll be abilities that describe when that needs to be applied. There's a pentagon shaped with an arrow on it. That is your evade token. That gives you an extra defense stat while you're playing. And then we have the objectives, obviously, which are on the table. And then we have this small green circle with an X on it. That is your activation token. These ones you're going to be using absolutely the most out of all of the rest, because this helps track which of your units had activated this turn and which ones had activated on the previous turn. And that's pretty much it as far as the tokens go. Like I said, we're trying to really streamline this. When you're playing, the only dice that you're going to need are 2 D10s, which are included in the starter kit. And flexible measuring tape. And then, I really would recommend printing out the measurement tool. Just at least even to have one to share with you and your opponent. This thing just makes things a lot easier for the speed of things and the accuracy of things, of knowing, am I within the 2 inches of an objective? Am I within my deployment zone? Where's your deployment zone? So I know where it is. So I can get, if I send a unit down there, I can get that extra victory point and so on. The other benefit of something like this with the measurement tool is that when you are placing terrain, you cannot be within 4 inches of another piece of terrain. So it makes it really simple to be like, okay, those are fine. Also, when you're placing terrain, you are not allowed to ever place a piece of terrain on top of one of the objective tokens. It's just better that way, that we don't end up with a situation where it gets slightly moved towards you or your opponent. And that's kind of thinking, also being mindful of like the competitive scene where someone might come along and try to accidentally bump it towards them because the way that they place the terrain, and then they know that with min-maxing of the inches. So we're just trying to avoid those kind of situations. The less that you need to pick up your model or your terrain or anything until it's time to actually move it, I think is always the better. That way there's just no disagreements of, oh, well, no, that was actually over here, that, and then you've moved it and all that, and then it just becomes a nightmare. So at the beginning of the game, flip back here to getting started playing. We've already discussed building your list, setting up the table. All right, so initiative. You both are going to roll 2 D10s. Whoever wins with being the higher roll gets to decide who goes first. Now the benefit of that is that the second player, whoever's going to be going second, gets to place the terrain first, which can end up being a really big deal, because maybe, let's say, I'm being a little extra cheeky, and when it comes down to things I'm like, you know what, my friend, I'm going to put this big piece of blocking terrain right here in between your objective and the middle objective, because I know I brought a bunch of fast units and I'm planning to rush to that center and start scoring quickly on round 2 in my favor. But going second does give me the possible negative that if he were to get there first with more units, he might control it, which could then end up going, south for me. I believe I covered, but just in case, yes, I did cover it. You have to have more units within the 2 inches of that objective to consider to control it. And you score at the beginning of your turn on round 2 or turn 2, and then onward until someone gets to 10 victory points. Okay. So you would set the terrain. Whoever would be going second would set up the terrain first. You each place 3. They can't be within 4 inches of each other. And then that would cover the terrain. We've already discussed the terrain height. Whoever's going to be going first, so let's say I'm going to be going first. My opponent already placed the terrain. We went back and forth until all 3 pieces for each of us was down. Now on my turn, I'm going to be placing all of my units within 4 inches of the edge of the mat on my side. I am allowed to put units into battle groups, which just means they have to be adjacent or engaged to each other. So if, let's say, I took these conscripts here, and I wanted to just make sure they're all in this nice formation over here. I've got my Banzers, and I want to put a couple in here. Maybe I'll give him one of the drones as well, and touch them both in the back, so then that way he's able, that's a repair drone, so he'll be able to help them as the game's moving. So I'd place everything out. I can put it wherever I want as long as it is within 4 inches of the edge of the mat. Nothing is allowed to go past that. As long as they're adjacent, those are considered to be in a battle group moving forward. We'll get to the battle groups in a quick second. When it comes to activating units and or battle groups, I get to activate 3 every turn. My opponent does 3 or up to 3. I get to go up to 3. I don't have to do any, but I do have to at least acknowledge I'm passing for my turn. Scoring, as I mentioned, happens at the beginning of turn 2. We've already covered how those points. Contested is as long as you have more models, more units within the range, you control it. If it is tie, it is considered contested, and you will not get points from that objective marker for that turn. We also covered the bonus points. So now we can get into battle groups. So battle groups are comprised of 2 to 5 units, and they are considered to be effectively one big unit until either some are destroyed or you decide to send one unit off, to do its own thing for whatever reason. Battle groups can be comprised of infantry, drones, and vehicles, or war mechs and drones. No other combination currently. When you activate a unit or a battle group, they'll be the same way in that you are going to measure from the center dot, which you just have to imagine that there is a center dot in the middle of your base, and then you just measure from that for however you're going to move. When you move a regular unit, just say like my war mech is out here by himself, the Anya, it moves 9, 16, and then 9 inches for jumping. So let's just say I wanted to just move my Anya because I just want to spend 1 action point, which we'll get into the action points things in a moment. I would measure from the center, measure out wherever 9 is, and if I had the flexible measuring tape, I could be moving around the terrain or such, move it up to the 9 inches, and then that one has considered to have moved. A rush is your second movement type speed, which in this case for the Anya is the 16 inches, meaning it's effectively a run, but we call it rush because there's going to be different types of units, so not everyone has legs to run. And then whatever's in the parentheses is your jump speed if you have jump. So like the Banzers don't have anything in parentheses for the movement because they're tanks, they don't jump. When you're moving a battle group, you will just choose one of the units to be the primary movement unit. You can only go as fast as the slowest member of your battle group. So if you had infantry and let's say a bunch of Serpent hover tanks, The infantry are going to dictate how fast that battle group is going to move. So it's important when building your battle group that you are considering, okay, if I got a bunch of slow units, I don't want to put them with my really fast ones or my jump capable ones, because then I'm kind of losing out on that. Let's see, that's for moving. So like if I were moving my Panzers here, let's say I'm just going to move, whatever the inches are for their speed. I believe it's 8. Panzer. 7. I was almost close. Move them to 7, move the drone behind them. They'd be considered move. When you are attacking, the difference between using a single unit and then using a battle group, when I am attacking with a single unit, I'm going to measure, again, from the center dot to the center dot of my target. Let's say that they are within range, so I know that that's fine. We could say that there is no other terrain, like we're going to shoot at the Sierra here. The solo unit would just use its attack value plus because if there's no other modifiers on the table, I would use the attack value, which for the Anya is a 9. I would roll the 2d10 and I would combine the result with the 9 to give me what my total attack value is for that particular roll. And I would compare that to the Sierra's defense. So the Sierra is a 17, so I would need at least an 8 without any modifiers on the table, of course. I would need an 8 or greater to do damage to the Sierra. When you hit your target, you just do whatever your damage is. There's no saves, there's no any prevention for the damage or anything like that. Currently, you just roll, was my attack value the same or greater than the defense of your defender? Yes, then you take damage. When you are declaring an attack, you do declare if it's going to be your primary or your secondary weapon, which on your stat card is the top weapon is your primary, the second weapon is your secondary. That way it's super clear. So I would just say to the Sierra, my opponent with the Sierra, I'm going to use my primary weapon from my Anya. You are within the 10-inch range. My attack is a 9. What's your defense? Oh, it's a 17. Okay, I need 8 or greater. Roll. Hey, I got a 14. All right, 14 plus 9, 23. I definitely got more than what you have. So, yeah, you can go ahead and eat the 4 damage, please, and then move on. When you are marking damage, you just do 1 health bubble per point of damage. On your stat card, you will see that you have a black box with a white circle in it. When you get to the black box, what you're going to do is, assuming that the unit didn't just instantly die from the rest of the damage, you're going to flip it over to the back side, and then from the back side there can be some breakdown of the stats or keywords, or it has new keywords. Maybe it has new weapons. There's all kinds of different things that can happen once it gets onto the back side of the card, and that is to simulate that it is taking damage through the fight and it's breaking down or it's changing tactics. When we start getting hero units in, that's going to start creating opportunities for us to do some really cool and creative things. So you'll just have to check your stats to make sure of what changed. Once you are on to the back side, you will stay on the back side for the rest of the game. So even though, in this case, my Panzers have a repair drone with them, the repair drone can repair, armored units. So let's say the Panzer on the right here, he ends up taking enough damage and his stat card gets flipped. Even if he were repaired to full health, he will stay with the back card stats through the rest of the game. That way it's not going to go back and forth and get all kinds of crazy. When you do flip them over, it is important to make sure that you mark how much damage was done from the front. So like if your Anya it takes 7 damage to get to the back. So if I got exactly 7, when I flip it over, I need to mark 7 damage so that way I remember, oh yeah, this Anya's already taken the 7 points of damage, because we don't want to accidentally heal ourselves in between flipping the stat card over. With battle groups performing a ranged attack, what you're going to do is declare which unit is your primary attacker. So let's assume that this battle group here had 2 Panzers, a drone, and a conscript here. It's a little bit difficult to see, but that's what this big cluster of stuff is, and we're going to shoot at the Sierra. So the first thing that we're going to do is declare the attack. We're going to declare who is the primary attacker. We make sure that all units that are participating in this battle group attack have range to the target, And in this case, we don't really have to worry about line of sight from the other units within the battle group. So like, let's say these conscripts here, let's move the Sierra over so that the conscripts line of sight would really have to cross maybe both of the Panzers in order to get to the Sierra. There's no worry about anything crossing and causing any sort of cover or anything like that, because in the battle group, it's assumed that these conscripts are going to, while they make the attack, they're going to pop out, they're going to shoot at the Sierra, and then they're going to pop back behind. So everything's working together because these are trained military soldiers. They're not just a bunch of, well, I guess we do have pirates as playable factions, so or at least we will soon for Battlefield, so that doesn't necessarily count, but anyway. For the attack, so let's say, we'll just for the sake of it, we'll say that this Panzer on the left will be the main attacker to the Sierra. We take the Panzer's attack value, which is 8. Then we're going to get a positive modifier for each friendly unit that is within our group that has an attack value. So in this case, the repair drone does not have an attack value, so he's not going to add anything to the attack. In Revelation Skirmish, or in Revelations, the lore in general, all drones are not permitted to have any sort of offensive weaponry that causes damage to, because there was a huge war against this AI known as the Collector, and it was a tremendous war that humanity almost got wiped out from. So they have made it just like a agreed upon thing that basically no one is allowed to use any sort of combat drones. All drones have to be either defensive or passive, providing some sort of ability like smoke or network or spotter. They cannot have a bunch of missiles on them to blow up enemy units. The only thing that is allowed to have a destructive weapon, such as a laser rifle or something, has to be either with a human inside of it or the one that's actually holding it. So drones are not allowed. So that's why when you're looking through the roster of the different units in Battlefield, you'll see that none of the drones have any sort of guns outside of like an AMS or maybe an EMP weapon, which only helps to shut down or disable a unit rather than actually causing destructive damage. So what you're going to do is you're going to add 1 for each of these. So the Panzer will have +2 to its attack from the other Panzer and the conscripts, as well as an extra point of damage for each of the contributing battle group members. So in this instance, the Panzer will do 2 extra points of damage if it can successfully hit the Sierra. So that makes battle groups really, really crazy intense for dealing out damage when they're, sending some rounds or missiles downrange. So the Sierra would be wouldn't be too happy getting hit by that. So you'd have to be aware that the battle group is around so that you don't get messed up. We're not going to really cover melee attacks in this particular video just because I don't want it to get too long. So let's move on over to the actions that you can do. The stats, I made a different video for covering the stats card breakdown. It's difficult to see them here with the way that the camera setup is, so I don't want to make you try to squint at anything. So during a turn, you have 3 different types of things that are going to be happening in order. You have scoring, you have your activation, and then the end. So scoring, it does not happen during round 1 because you don't have any units within range of an objective, and if you did happen to, you still wouldn't get any points for it. So that'll be worried about during turn 2. During your activation phase, you have a variety of different types of actions you can perform. I'll go over some of these briefly. I don't want to get, like I said, too much into the deep weeds of this, but it'll at least give you an overview. You can perform the move, like I said, the rush, jump. The rush and jump both cost 2 action points, which each of your stat cards will show. Most vehicles, drones, and infantry are going to have 2. War mechs will have at least 3. And that's to kind of differentiate that the war mechs, while they are the eye candy and the kind of heroes of skirmish and battlefield, they are still not the king of the battlefield. Vehicles do a ton of damage, and infantry all have the capability to hurt war mechs. So if you have enough of them, it's a serious threat to a war mech. So then you have ranged attacks. You can perform melee attacks, target lock, which does allow you to help re-roll when you're performing an attack. All attacks made by the designator. So the way that I think I mentioned, you'd put the small token, then you put the big token on your target, and the small token is with whichever unit was the designator. And then you'd perform whenever you do an attack or a friendly unit is attacking the unit that has that marker on them, the big one, you reroll 1d10 when performing ranged attacks. Or actually any attacks, I'm sorry, it's any attacks. So melee attacks as well. So target locks are pretty devastating to be able to get those onto enemy units, especially if you've played skirmish. In skirmish, there are certain weapons that can only be fired if there is a target lock, like missiles. You can perform an evade action, which will give you a +1 to your defense until your next turn. So throughout your opponent's whole turn, whatever unit you were to evade, or if your whole battle group were to evade, then you would have that +1 to your defense. There's going to be some equipment or abilities that may use action points, like with the drones, there's like the EMP, but there's also another one that has, it's evading me at the moment. So some equipment or abilities may require an action point to be spent. Infantry can perform an entrenched action, which you use, I forgot to cover that. There is a diamond shape that has an arrow pointing down. That is your entrenched token. In skirmish, that's fallen, just in case we did change that for Battlefield. When you do an entrenched, until your infantry unit moves throughout the rest of the game, you place that blue token there and they have entrenched for the rest of the game until they move, you get a +3 to your defense from any ranged attacks. So until they move, you've increased their defense, and that would be for the whole unit. So like if I took my battle group here of conscripts and performed an entrenched, now they all have +3. This is a really useful thing, in my opinion, for if you can take some infantry and secure an objective, then you can go entrenched, and now you're that much harder for your opponent to try to remove you from that with very cheap infantry. And also you can pass. So there are different types of melee attacks, which you can see in the rule book. The different types of units I kind of briefly covered, but I just want to make sure I go over it very clearly. There's infantry, vehicles, drones, war mechs. Those are the 4 different types of units. They're each going to have their own different types of bases. The only thing that you kind of have to worry about is that infantry and drones have a 360-degree arc. Most drones don't have any sort of ranged thing to use except like the EMP, but it is worth pointing out. Vehicles and war mechs on their bases are 2 notches. Those 2 notches are your rear arc. It's important to make that differentiation because lots of players have glued their models on backwards because they hadn't yet read the rules. So I always try really hard to make sure to point that out because I know it's not necessarily common, because typically when you see just one arc, it's probably going to be what? Your front arc. I thought it would be better, instead of worrying about front and side arcs, simplify that, just make it a front arc and a rear arc. That way, you don't have to get in the minutia of, technically, my laser pointer it looks like it's a side arc there, buddy. I hate that. It drives me nuts in lots of other games. Unless it's otherwise said, you cannot shoot out of the rear arc. But the benefit of being able to get your unit to shoot into their rear arc is that rear arc gives you a +2 to your attack. When targeting and performing ranged attacks, each ranged attack is typically only going to be 1 action point. Infantry and vehicles can shoot at 2 different targets in the same turn because they typically have 2 actions. So, let's say the Banzer shoots at the Sierra, then the Banzer wants to shoot over here at a Mars main battle tank for the Republic. There's no negative effect for that. War mechs, however, when they switch targets in the same activation, it's a +1 defense to that second defender, or third if they happen to go, use all 3 to shoot at different things. That's typically because war mechs are controlled by a singular pilot, while vehicles are going to have a crew, and then your fire team of infantry, obviously there's multiple soldiers there. So we've kind of covered with the movement, the rear arc. There's an illustration here in the rulebook that covers that. There are currently 5 different movement types, which are indicated on your stat card. There's foot, tracked, hover, wheeled, and war mech. And the point of knowing that is because of how that they interact with one another when they're crossing different types of terrain. So that's covered here also. We can probably just cover just ranged attacks. Oh no, we already did cover that earlier. Line of sight is kind of important. So with your line of sight, as long as 50% or let's say less than 50% is obstructed by a piece of terrain or other models, that enemy unit does not get cover. So you would draw your line of sight from the center dot to their center dot. So like, for example, if we were doing this here with the woods, this woods does obstruct part of the Sierra, but not 50% or greater of the Sierra. So it would not, in fact, get the cover from the woods, which is generally easy to figure out because if your center dot doesn't cross a piece of terrain, they're absolutely not getting that terrain cover. That's usually the easiest way to do that. We have the 50% rule there and the cover for drones, which is mostly clear. The only other thing I think to point out for the most of it is critical hits and critical misses. A critical hit is if you roll 2 10s on your D10s. That is considered an automatic success, especially if you're trying to capture with infantry. Is automatic successful capture but does not do the addition. Yeah, right, because capture doesn't do an extra damage. If you roll a critical hit, which is 2 10s when performing a ranged attack or a melee attack, you'll do an extra point of damage to the target. If you ever roll 2 1s, even if there was a bunch of negative modifiers or a bunch of positive modifiers to your attack roll, even if you needed a 2 or less to hit, as long as you roll 2 1s, it is always considered whatever you were rolling for a fail. Unless you're rolling for initiative, and that just means that sucks for you. But anything else, when it comes to your weapons, one other thing to cover, different weapons will have different keywords, which are then going to be explained in the box lower on your stat card. We've tried to make sure that all keywords are on the stat card so that you're not having to go and consult some sort of rule book or codex or something else to go find out what those special keywords are for your army. So instead, they're on the card, but there are 2 of them that are in the rule book. And they're super easy to remember. If your weapon says heavy target, it can only shoot anything but infantry. And if it has anti-personnel, that weapon can only shoot infantry. That's it. Right now, those are the only 2 that you have to memorize. So it's super easy. Heavy target is anything that's covered in armor, not power armor. Anti-personnel is anything that's some squishy dude or a power armor. And that's the gist of the rules. The rules, like I said, are not very long. There's some special rules in here for different types of melee actions that you can do, also for capture. There's different things in here for like what state your unit is in, whether it's engaged or normal or transported, but that's kind of getting into the minutia of certain situations. The only other thing that I think that should be left to be covered before we end this video is exerted. When you are activating, so like let's say I went on turn 1, I activated this battle group and this war mech. So what I would do is I would take 2 of my activation tokens, which are the circles. I would set them down facing up, so the little shape on there is up towards me. That indicates that they are done, right? Let's say they've already performed all their actions and all the other things that they want to do. And let's say, you know what, for giggles, we've got a smoke drone over here, and he was my 3rd unit that got activated. Yeehaw, I got 3 things that are activated. At the end of my turn, I'm going to flip each of these activation tokens face down, and they are going to stay here. So let's say my opponent goes, does everything he wants to do. Now it's back to me. I get 3 more activation tokens to spend. But if I choose to activate one of my units or battle groups that went in the previous turn, they are now going to be considered exerted. So they are able to perform all their actions, but there's negative side effects. And on subsequent turns, they cannot go. So let's say turn 1, I went with my Anya, my battle group, and then my smoke drone. I'll flip over here to the exerted page. Let's say I decide to go with my battle group of the tanks and my infantry and my drone. And why is it that when you are flipping through a book, you can find the specific thing, but when you want to find it, it is then sneaky. Exerting. Here we go. If I exert a vehicle or an infantry, they take 1 point of damage. They are able to finish whatever their action was going to be before they would be removed from play, but they're going to take 1 point of damage when all is said and done. If I exert a battle group, all of those members are going to take a point of damage. War mechs lose an action point when they are exerted. So the way that we would do this is, like, let's say I want to go ahead and go with this battle group. I would put down another activation token, also facing up. And because at the end of my turn, obviously I would know, oh, that one has 2. These guys are all going to be considered exerted. If I did not go with these other units, say the Anya and the smoke drone did not go, they are going to lose their token. And then that way on the next turn, so let's say turn 3, they're fresh and can go do whatever they want, and there's no negative side effects to being activated or taking extra damage. At the end of turn 2, like I said, I would flip over that second activation token for this battle group here. They all have their point of damage and everything. But then on turn 3, I would see, oh, I've still got those 2 flipped over activation tokens. That battle group can't do squat. None of them can. And that's just how that'll be for them until they have a turn to rest. So I think that covers the vast majority of everything to do in the rules. I hope that this video was helpful for being able to kind of get a basic grasp of things. From here, I mean, you know the majority of the rules, you'd be able to dive right in and start playing. So it's a pretty simple rule set. There are some other rules, like I said, like some of the advanced melee stuff, just because there's like, you can use your mech to shove, or you can capture with your infantry to capture enemy units. And there's a couple of other smaller things, but I mean, more or less, that's the vast majority of everything in Revelations Battlefield. So thank you for watching. If you have questions, please comment below or comment in one of our Facebook or Discord communities. And then, consider supporting us on Kickstarter. And the second best thing to supporting us financially is sharing the project, sharing the campaign, sharing Revelations with your gaming buddies is absolutely huge. One of the biggest hurdles in this industry is getting in front of new players. And there is nothing more powerful than word of mouth, or just being like, hey man, I'm getting into this game, I'm looking for someone else to play with. Do you want to play with me? Whatever. And then going from there. If you purchase the 2-player starter kit, there's basically 100-ish points currently as the way that their points stand at the moment for both of them. So they're both pretty close to exact. You could decide to use both. You wouldn't have a faction pure list, but you could choose to use both if you wanted to try to get up to that 200-point limit. Or you could just play, a slightly less point game against your opponent, and then, if you both agree, hey, let's do 100 points for this, nothing wrong with that. All right. So anyway, thank you guys very much. I don't know how to end this.